Back in the day, we'd plug in our game consoles into the back of our CRT televisions through an RF or composite connection and spend the afternoon gaming. With the switch to high-definition televisions, retro consoles haven't fared so well. That's why many gamers still keep a CRT around to game on. But what if I told you there was a way to turn this into this on an HDTV? In this episode of Retro Buyer's Guide, I'll show you how to get the best picture out of your retro consoles. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to episode 34 of Retro Buyer's Guide. I'm Mike, and long time no see, I know. I am going to go over how to get the best picture out of your consoles on an HDTV today. Something I've been very excited about over the last few months and working on optimizing the picture for all of the consoles in my collection. And so we're going to go over how each of mine is hooked up and how you can get RGB out of some consoles natively using a SCART cable and a converter. So without further ado, let's check it out. The main way for getting RGB video out of these consoles is through a SCART cable. And what you're going to need to do is go onto eBay and find a seller named Retro Console Accessories. I usually get my cables in about 2 to 3 days all the way from Florida, 4 at the most. But she does a phenomenal job of shipping them out quickly and answering any questions that I have about what cable I need to get for what console. I highly recommend her on eBay. Retro_console_accessories. Look her up. This is a Genesis SCART cable that I bought from her, and you can see it's labeled Genesis 1 because that's the model that I have, and this part here hooks on the back. So if you're looking at this and thinking, I don't recognize this kind of plug from anything, that's because it was never used here in the United States. It was primarily used in Europe. And so SCART, although it has the ability to get RGB out of these consoles, is not compatible with North American television sets. So you're probably asking yourself, well, how do you get the signal to your television? Well, that's pretty easy. What you need to do is go online and buy yourself one of these. This is a SCART to component box. You can see here on the bottom you have the familiar green, blue, and red inputs, and what you need to do is plug the SCART cable into this end here and then output it through component cables, which will go to your HDTV. Now I use mine through component because of my setup. Some people get a SCART to an HDMI box, which you can also buy, and you can have all of the sound pumped through the SCART cable and into this box and out HDMI, and that's a simpler setup for some people. Because of my scaler not having HDMI inputs, I have to use a component, but it still produces a really great signal, and I still am able to get 720p scaling out of it using this box. So these things are pretty cheap too. I think I paid maybe I think $30 to $40, somewhere in that range for it. I don't really remember. The signal quality is phenomenal through this thing, I think, and it's a pretty decent build. It's made of metal and feels a little more substantial than some of the other converter boxes that I've bought through the years on eBay and Amazon. But if you find something like this on eBay and Amazon, it probably costs around 30 to 40 bucks, and it's definitely worth the investment if you either decide to go the component route or the HDMI route. Either one works. And so yeah, this is the missing piece, and what you get out of it is phenomenal video from your retro consoles. The good news is that the Sega Master System, the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis Model 1 and Model 2, the Sega Saturn, and the Neo Geo CD all natively output RGB video, and all you need to do is buy the right cable. When combined with a decent scaler, the results can be mind-blowing. While it looks like I'm playing through an emulator due to the razor-sharp pixels, everything you see here is RGB video directly from the consoles themselves. But in the case of the NES, you have to get someone to mod it, which is a lot more expensive than just buying the right cable. So at first glance, it looks like a regular NES with the always reliable front-loading slot there, but if you flip it around, you can see, oh, that's not quite what I remembered, and that's because this is a console that I had somebody mod. Right here you see is the regular RF switch, which is how most people got the Nintendo signal to their television back in the day. Unfortunately, it's a pretty awful picture on an HDTV because it carries all of the information through one cable, and so I don't recommend using that one at all. Most people will probably have access to composite cables, which are the yellow and red jacks here, and the information was separated into two cables. You had all of your audio mono going through one cable and all of your video going through this yellow cable here. And while it is a better looking picture, it is still pretty far from what you would consider acceptable to look at on an HD television. So let's go back to the back here, and let's take a look at some of the mods. So you can see here the pin here on the left is for S-Video. So he's enabled S-Video on this console, which is a lot better picture than the composite here on the side. And I would say that would be your first major step in upgrading all your consoles, is to go to S-Video. When I had a CRT television and I upgraded all my consoles to S-Video, the picture quality was markedly better, and I just thought, wow, it doesn't get any better than this. Right next to it here we have the stereo out, so you can actually plug in a 3.5 millimeter cable into this, and you can get stereo sound out of it, so that's pretty cool. And a lot of the SCART cables you buy will have that cable attached to it to get your audio out of that. This is the 8-pin DIN right here, which is for the SCART cable. This is the palette switch. Now what's interesting about an RGB mod for the regular Nintendo is that you can have it flip between 3 different palettes. So there's, I believe, full color, there's the natural palette, and then there's the enhanced palette. I prefer the natural palette. I just think it looks the best. It looks the most authentic. Here is the stereo and mono switch. You can actually, he's put a switch on here to flip back and forth between the two different settings. So pretty cool. The seller's name is Crayola the Crayon King, and I highly recommend him on eBay. He does phenomenal work, and thanks to him, I have an RGB modded Nintendo Entertainment System. Here's Castlevania 3 through a regular Nintendo with composite video out, and here it is through my RGB modded Nintendo. It's a pretty big difference. Here we have Mega Man 2 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and again, the video quality is just stunning through RGB. I mentioned earlier that you can combine this RGB video into a video scaling device, which will allow it to be scaled properly on an HDTV. The reason a lot of retro consoles look poor on an HDTV is because the internal scaler does a poor job of scaling these retro consoles. A lot of people go with the FrameMeister. It seems to be the most popular option online, at least, with the best results and reviews. It also tends to be the most expensive. In my setup, I have an iScan HD, which I've been very happy with, and I picked it up on eBay, I think a few years back, for about $80. You can tend to find them even cheaper nowadays, so I would definitely recommend picking up that one as well. Well, that's it for this episode of Retro Buyer's Guide. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video has been helpful for someone out there. If you're interested in learning more about scaling and RGB video, I highly recommend checking out My Life in Gaming. Their YouTube channel is phenomenal, and it has a lot of information on this stuff, way more than is in this video, so definitely check that out. Thanks a lot, guys, and until next time, happy collecting.